Hey, y'all, we're back with Texas Capitol Live. We had a little interruption there, a little technical difficulties, but glad to be back live with you. And we want to dive back into Kennard's Corner, and we wanted to lead off talking about the DART controversy, the Dallas Area Rapid Transit System, and some awesome reporting that Dallas Express has been doing about this. We've got the latest article here up on the screen, and the leading headline is DART's crime surging, cities voting to leave. Can 24.6 million turn the bus around? And so this is referring to some earlier reporting that the Dallas Express had done that really revealed this ongoing kind of financial issue with DART, which has spent billions of dollars on a significant expansion of the system, has also run into issues with delivering services to people, saying, well, we're running out of money, and at the same time was paying out bonuses to the executives that run the system, which was brought into question by even some elected representatives. And ultimately, that has led to some of the cities, the first one being Plano, actually saying we're going to have a popular vote to see if the city will leave the DART system. And that's going to take place in May of 2026. So this was some really good reporting by the Dallas Express. They also had a podcast, and I actually want to share a little video from that because Texas State Representative Mitch Little, who sits on the Transportation Committee, weighed in on this and I think provides some really helpful insight to what is being talked about, what's being discussed, and why this is kind of bubbling to the surface now. Can we play that video, please?
Shannon, another article came out on the 29th.
I saw something from Express yesterday.
Yeah, and it's
mind-boggling. In fact, I think I reposted it.
Yes. And so I thank you for that because it's the Plano versus DART.
Yeah, I think I saw, if I'm remembering correctly, Sarah, I think Plano has put in $109 million and got $44 million back in service.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yes.
This came up during the legislative session, as you know.
Yeah.
And it's very contentious because DART works very hard to sustain itself and tries to operate independent of the rules that all of us in our businesses face. Like, does this make sense? Mm-hmm. Is this actually producing a public good at a reasonable price? Like, those seem to be irrelevant considerations.
And sadly, I mean, for Plano, it's a very poor business decision to be part of DART.
Yeah, but they're not.
So we can go ahead and stop
it
there.
And Irving and
I think Representative Little really got to the issue here, which is, does this make sense? And clearly, in the situation for the city of Plano, at least from an economic perspective, it doesn't come anywhere close to making sense when they're paying out hundreds of millions of dollars and getting some fraction of services in return. And that doesn't even take into consideration the increasing concerns around the crime and the safety issues. This does, however, have an impact also on the capital markets because the expansion of DART originally was intended to be funded by the fares that people paid. Well, over time, that has shifted to being funded by the member cities out of their sales taxes. And then on top of that, you've had municipal debt that has been raised to fund this expansion. So all of a sudden you have this debt outstanding that is based on the contributions of all of these member cities. And I think that's fairly unique in the municipal debt system to have this kind of situation of a major amount of debt outstanding and all of a sudden one of a group of cities saying we're going to exit. The issue is, although, that Plano is setting a precedent where you have other cities, Irving and Carrollton and others as well, that are in a similar situation. So you could have a cascading effect here. And I think that we are far from the end of hearing about this issue. And unfortunately, I want to show a post from today by Dallas City Councilwoman Kara Mendelson referring to this Dallas Express reporting and tagging Representative Mitch Little in this. She says, I guess the story will be updated since DART voted to give the CEO a $60,000 bonus this week. So a pretty incredible post that in the middle of this kind of scandal and this heightened scrutiny around the value proposition of DART, you see the situation really starting to get a lot of attention and more difficult to justify. Why are bonuses being paid when you have an entity that is not delivering the value to its constituent citizenry? And all of a sudden you have a vote coming up in May with the city of Plano. I want to keep a close watch on that because I think it's much more than just the city of Plano that's at stake there. And more you see people coming out and just saying, as Representative Little said, does this make sense? hard to find a way to say that it does. More headlines forthcoming, and I commend the Dallas Express on their reporting on this. They really broke this story, and it's worth going to listen to that whole interview that we played a video from at dallasexpress.com. I want to continue moving on to our Texas markets brief, and there's kind of two sides to this coin. So we've been talking about the public transit side and kind of the issues with DART and the trains. Well, the other part of this picture in terms of the economic viability of that is the advancement in self-driving technology. And what we have is a great article here from Dallas Innovates highlighting the advancement of that technology. Specifically at this point, the headline is Waymo robotaxis to go fully autonomous in Dallas in the coming weeks. And I want to read a little bit from the article. I encourage you to go to Dallas Innovates and read it. It says, Waymo announced that fully autonomous driving will soon be introduced in 5 new cities: Dallas, Miami, Houston, San Antonio, and Orlando. So Texas getting a lot of attention there in terms of the opportunity. The fact is that the culture here has always been more oriented towards being a car culture. Look, I lived in DC in a past life. I didn't have a car. I rode the train there. That was fine. Now that I've been back home in Dallas, I haven't been on DART a single time, and I know basically no one that has. And that I don't think is going to change just from a cultural perspective. The article goes on to say, fully driverless operations start today in Miami and will roll out in Dallas and the other 3 cities over the coming weeks ahead of opening our doors to riders next year, the company said. When Waymo begins fully driverless operations in Dallas in the coming weeks, only Waymo employees will be taking rides in the robotaxis for the time being. So they're launching this program to employees first. I wanted to highlight that to people that are maybe like me and you're saying, when can I try this? Well, we don't have a hard date of when this will actually be available to the public in general. Waymo's not the only company. I want to highlight a few others that are coming to Dallas and investing in driverless technology here. You have San Francisco-based Uber, who has teamed up with Austin-based, Texas-based AV Ride and announced a multi-year partnership that will bring the delivery technology with AV Ride's robots, which I've actually seen on the streets here. A lot of people have probably seen them around downtown Dallas, but they're going to expand that as well to Uber driverless cars and taxis. Lyft also said in February that it will roll out its own Dallas robotaxi service, aiming for a 2026 launch in collaboration with the Japan-based Marubeni and Israel-based Mobileye, which has driverless technology that they're going to deliver through Lyft here in the U.S. and in Dallas. And of course, there's the advancements that we've seen from Tesla. They have really been focused on the Austin market, but have also announced their intention to expand, and we expect that to come as well. So you've got just there 4 different entities and partnerships that are working actively to deliver driverless solutions to Dallas first, but then expanding towards the area that directly overlays DART. And I think these are the 2 sides of the coin that we got to keep having this discussion, because the driverless technology today is the worst it's ever going to be and the most expensive it's ever going to be. And it's getting cheaper, it's getting faster, it's getting better. It seems that public transit, unfortunately, DART is getting slower, more expensive, and bleeding more and more funds towards safety initiatives to try to address the concerns of citizens. We'll see if they can improve. At the end of the day, I don't root for the failure of DART, but I do have to recognize the reality that they're up against some very serious challenges.
Dare I say, there is a potential future where, the government may own its own Waymo or Uber type of, Uber automated type of public transit system. I mean, because in particularly places like this, where it's not concentrated, where a metro or subway doesn't really make any sense.
I think that's a really good point, JBA. And I heard someone leading up to the vote in Plano to actually, so what they had to do in Plano is first they had to have a city council vote to then put this on the ballot. And then the citizenry of Plano votes to then determine if they will leave DART or not. And in that discussion, I remember that it came up that for the amount of money that Plano's paying for this DART system,
Makes no
we
sense.
could just have an Uber for everybody. And of course, that's with a driver itself. So as you have this technology roll out, I think you bring up a really interesting point that people have to be kind of running those calculations. Like, at what point does it actually make sense to provide a public benefit by leveraging this technology? And cities could be a first mover and get a lot of like interest and PR and external attention through, being a first one to adopt something like that.
Oh,
I think you're
absolutely.
right. I mean, And the place that makes the most sense is Texas, with these big sprawling cities and these suburbs that, particularly the ones that have kind of avoided the train. You know, like Frisco and McKinney didn't get pulled into DART, so they're not dealing with
And they're
that
happy about
mess.
it.
Oh yeah, I don't think they have any interest in finding themselves in that tornado, and so I'd put jurisdictions like that kind of top of the list as potential places where something like that could be adopted. Good point, JB. Want to move on to our policy update, and wanted to start this off with a post from AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I'll just read this. Trump's economy is being held up by a massive AI bubble. A recent study found that of 300 companies that own generative AI tools, 95% reported zero return on their investments. We will not entertain a bailout of these companies should this bubble pop. So I want to respond to this with something that I don't know if I've ever said, which is I agree on one point here with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and that is we don't want bailouts of any companies, frankly. Now, AI companies more recently have been in the headlines around this because there were some quotes from an OpenAI executive around, is the government going to backstop some of the financing for the infrastructure build out? And administration officials were quick to respond that there are no plans to have any kind of bailout or backstop. We just want to accelerate permitting and allow companies to build in the U.S. However, at the same time, I have to point out that this reasoning from the representative is really kind of absurd, because with any growing technology that's in a rapid expansion phase, you are not going to be generating free cash flow. That's not unique to AI. That's really every business. When you're an emerging industry in a growth phase, you're raising money, you're building it out, you're going to be cash flow negative in order to get to a point of achieving economic sustainability.
You could have said the same thing about Amazon in 2015, 2014.
That's right. We
Same thing.
would have shut down how many other industries if you applied this line of reasoning? Only someone who has never had a real job could honestly try to put this forth as an argument around trying to regulate or clamp down on AI. So I think it's a really dangerous narrative, and the kind of hyper politicization of the technology is just undermining American industry. It just doesn't make sense. It's kind of like the DART discussion.
The only question, the only question I think that AOC might have some legitimacy on this, is she doesn't really, but is the two schools of thought of, is the AI bubble more like '08 or is the AI bubble more like .com? I would say probably .com, because, you know, the underlying asset under like the mortgage crisis was the underlying asset is a cash producing business,
Right.
versus homes aren't cash producing, right? So, and also they can be resold and actually have equipment in them. So I think this is rather, she doesn't understand you can either have a lot of cash flow at the beginning of a business or you can grow, you know, and you can't really do both at the same time.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'm going to just tag on to that as well. Did we have kind of a huge run-up and overvaluation and issues with the emergence of the internet? Of course. Yeah, nobody debates that. But the internet didn't go away, and most companies, like Amazon's the prime example, showed that that technology actually ended up being a huge net contributor to the economy, and many companies survived that bubble and came out of it. So to what degree is there an AI bubble? Is it going to burst? Well, I don't know exactly. Are some companies going to run into being over leveraged? I think that's almost unavoidable. But the underlying technology is without a doubt contributing to the economy, and pointing to it as being negative cash flow is,
another
really
thing,
just nonsensical.
Another thing you say as well is, I mean, and look, we had the Saudis at the White House the other day, $1 trillion in commitments. I mean, you know, under the Trump administration, you have $10 trillion in inflow and investment. I mean, that's going to have a massive positive effect. Like you can't look at $10 trillion inflowing, building infrastructure, factories, real assets, and say, oh well, you know, I think it's rather you know, poor timing on her part.
Yeah, it's fair to say she probably didn't have the $1 trillion from Saudi Arabia and this cash flow calculation that she was referring to. So
Certainly not.
So hey, to wrap that up, it's like, yeah, we agree. We don't want to have bailouts. I think that's let's keep that bipartisan. No bailouts, okay? But also don't have a ridiculous argument throwing an industry under the bus when this is a critical national security issue to invest in the technology. So that's federal level. I want to take a minute and bring it home to Texas. I want to play a video, if we can get that up, Bryce, of Governor Abbott and some good commentary around what's the political priority going into the next year's election.
Some of you will remember in the last election, I said the time has come for Texas to pass education freedom choice for every parent and every child across the entire state of Texas. I said there was an easy way to do it or a hard way to do it. And the legislature took the hard way, and we went on the campaign trail, and we elected enough votes to get it done. I'm committed to doing the same thing with regard to property tax reform. I am going to make this my primary point. I'm going to make across the state, and we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but I can guarantee you we are going to get the laws passed that finally end your property tax problems here in the state of Texas.
So I almost wanted to start clapping there myself, because this has been a refrain year after year politically here in Texas. The property taxes are out of control. They're too high. You talk to anyone about their property taxes and they immediately are going to crunch up, have a negative reaction. And because we've seen such a run up in home values, and that's what's driving a lot of the increased tax burden. Yet in the last legislative session, there was some quote unquote relief provided. And I think this is where you create this real tension. So there's this talking point of we delivered tax relief, but the overall burden, the amount you're actually paying in the state for the overwhelming majority of people, has gone up year after year after year. Now, to be fair to the state government, a lot of that is driven by the local municipalities. And so that's a big piece in this. What I want to highlight, though, in the governor's comments is his reference to the last election cycle and the issue that he focused on in that cycle, which was education savings accounts. And you had a lot of consternation in the legislature. And he said, this is the number one issue. We're going to have a discussion about this as a state. We did. And there were significant changes. And that's what he referred to as, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The hard way is we're going to have a big campaign about it, and a lot of people are probably going to lose their jobs and be voted out. I think that he's touching on the issue that Texans want our government focused on, which is get the property tax system under control, give people clarity as to what their taxes are going to be over the long term, and deliver actual real relief, not just at the state level, but also at the local level. There's a lot of resistance to that. That's why it hasn't meaningfully been done yet. And frankly, I'm encouraged to hear kind of that level of conviction around this, to say, we've tried a couple of times. We haven't gotten it done the way it needs to get done. And if it's going to have to get done the hard way, then we're ready to do that. And the governor has a track record. When he says that, he delivers. So I hope this time is the same. I commend Governor Abbott on making this the issue, because it should be the number one issue. We want to be the economic powerhouse of the country. We are that. The biggest threat to that is this runaway property tax system that is undermining home affordability and keeping people out of their homes, and even pricing them out of their homes, because you're renting your home basically from the government forever, paying these out of control property taxes. So I think it's important for all Texans, and particularly JBA, also for the younger generation that is struggling a lot with home ownership. And this is a big part of that puzzle. So expect this to continue to be driving the headlines. And this is really the governor setting a new agenda, that no more kind of half promises here. It's time for real reform that actually changes the way that people interact with the system of property taxes. I think the state's ready for it. Hopefully it's a bipartisan issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hopefully it is. And I'll go back to saying what I've said previously, that for home ownership, it's going to be honestly the new opportunities in legislation that is, the map's going to be available this coming year, and it'll be in effect in 2027. I mean, it seems like that's really going to be the place where people can afford to actually have home ownership. You know, if they haven't had upside or equity in the upside for the past 20 years.
Right.
I don't really see another solution. But I mean, you know, the decreasing of property tax. I mean, I think that your primary residence, you know, should not be taxed. I mean, you're not making money on it. You know, you're just gaining equity, hopefully. So, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Well said, JBA, and we'll continue to track that issue as well. We're going to wrap this episode of Texas Capitol Live. We'll be coming back next week.